Times of London just reported that, indeed there's new evidence and testimonies describing the sexual assault carried out by Hamas on October 7th. This has been a weirdly a sticking point with the anti-Israel crew. Even the ones who might have accepted the footage they have seen will not accept that there was any sexual. And I'm sure people listening can know the sort of lefty firebrands that I'm talking about, who will say, no, there was no rape on October 7th. But you're saying that absolutely there was the case.
Yeah, I'm quite tired of being gaslit. I know what I've seen, and I know what the evidence I've seen is, and it's beyond question. And there's a reason people deny it, and it's because the murders and the burning of kibbutzim, in their heads, they justify it as resistance. Hamas were justified in doing that because they lived in a concentration camp and yada, yada, yada. Obviously nonsense, but that's their position. When you throw rape into the mix, that's very hard to justify as the actions of a freedom-fighting resistance operation. And it kind of derails their entire narrative. So there's an immediate cognitive dissonance when people have the rape put to them, and I think that's why it's so denied. It's also damaging to the Arab audience, of course, where rape is not considered an acceptable behaviour, and again that resistance narrative suddenly derails when you accept that Hamas went on a mass rape endeavour on 7th of October. So there's a very clear kind of psychology behind why people are so keen to deny this. And you can see when you mention it online, immediately the bot swarm descends upon you.
Yeah.
It's the one thing that triggers them off every single time. You can guarantee your mentions will be full of denial of this stuff. But, it wasn't just rape. It was mutilation and just absolutely unspeakable ways to treat a human body, quite frankly. And this new report's, it's, some of the evidence they talk about in this is stuff I've seen. And people go, why haven't they released it? Well, when in any rape in the West ever do we release the evidence? The victims have a right to privacy. They have a right to not have their worst moments released to the world for people to mock and say that it's faked and deny that what happened to them happened to them. Of course, it's this double standard that gets applied to Israel. Why haven't you showed your women being raped to the world? It's like, listen to yourselves when you ask this question. Absolutely horrifying.
It was even worse in that the IDF are being accused of behaving like that in Gaza. Now, maybe it's my bias, but I find that very hard to believe. And I've not seen any footage of that. I've not seen any, and there's some footage you might find of sort of IDF sort of standing in a circle trying to hide something that's going on.
In prison, yeah.
What was that?
It was at the prison. It's the detention facility inside Israel itself. There's a video where essentially the guys put their shields up and you see a prisoner getting forced against the wall. But again, there's no evidence of rape there. The soldiers involved who were arrested weren't charged with rape. They are now suing people who published that they were rapists. So, they're confident enough in their own innocence that they are taking this to civil court for defamation. And again, there's no actual evidence of rape there. And the one other major report throughout the war about rape by the IDF was Al-Shifa Hospital. And Al Jazeera published that. And then the woman who made the allegation retracted 24 hours later. So Al Jazeera were forced to delete that article and retract it. There's lots of allegations. And quite frequently we see the old deny, reverse accusation piece here that you get in domestic abuses, where the abuser alleges they are the victim of what they've actually done. And you see this all the time, that inversion. There was a spate of videos that came out last year of like beheaded babies in Gaza. Bombs don't behead people and leave the rest of the body untouched. That's not how high explosive munitions work. It was clearly a Hamas attempt to mock Israel for the mistake they made on that reporting of 7th of October, talking about 40 beheaded babies, which was acknowledged as a mistake. It was acknowledged as misreporting. The IDF never claimed it, but Hamas saw an opportunity to mock Israel for that. And it's a pattern that you've seen time and time again throughout this conflict.
It's worth talking about the numbers we have, which everyone listening knows that we get this from the Gaza Health Ministry, which is run by Hamas. And I think as we speak now, it's something like they claim 55,000 killed. Israel claims something like 20 to 25,000 of them are militants. What do you believe about these numbers? What do you not believe? How do we interpret those? What's going on in the casualties and fatalities in Gaza?
Yeah, so I wrote a paper on this that was published last December. It was published through the Henry Jackson Society. It's called Questionable Counting, and it was what we call a qualitative study. You can't do quantitative analysis on this. You can't look at the numbers because you don't have access to the bodies. You don't have access to the military, the hospital records. You don't have access to the data you need to properly crunch it. So we're getting two kinds of reports: qualitative, which is what I've done, and then you have the statistical modelling where people kind of try and wave a wet finger in the air, looking at how they think it'll go, and they come up with a figure, be that higher or lower. It's almost always higher, which I think potentially suggests an agenda, but discuss. And what we found in our paper was a number of errors that suggested trends. So men misclassified as women misclassified as men, adults classified as children, people that we found on social media had been killed by Hamas were on those lists. And it doesn't matter if you think it's faked or not. We're not saying definitively that Hamas are manipulating the numbers, but what we can say is that there were a significant number of errors in the total that the world's media had been reporting for more than a year. And then, of course, this most recent list, Hamas themselves removed 3,400 names because they didn't have enough evidence to have had them on there in the first place. So even Hamas agrees that there are challenges and difficulties when it comes to recording these casualty figures. But what we also looked at in our paper was the trends over the years. Obviously, there have been a lot of fisticuffs bouts in Gaza. This is, I think, the 6th or 7th. Obviously the biggest, but there have been plenty of other operations beforehand. And there's a pattern, and it happens every time. Hamas release a figure. They never release militant or casualty deaths. They just give a total. The Israel Defense Forces will release what they think is the rough number of combatants that they've killed. And then about 3 or 4 months down the line, it all comes out that basically the total was about right and the IDF figure was about right as well. And this happens time and time again. Why is it so difficult for Israel to record how many combatants they've killed? It's probably a very good question. And the answer is the fog of war. Now, to give you an anecdote from personal experience, in Afghanistan, I was once in a firefight with the Taliban, and at the reorg, at the end of the firefight, when everything had finished and calmed down, my 3 section commanders who worked for me and we couldn't agree between the 4 of us what direction the enemy fire was coming in. Okay, when you're on your belt buckle and rounds are flying around the place, you're not counting bodies as they fall. Maybe the snipers are, that's a very intimate way of killing someone through that level of magnified scope. Maybe they can keep a regular count, but your average squad on the ground, or your average rifleman has no ability to give you an accurate, especially when you're using indirect weapons that are firing over your heads, things like mortars or artillery, big blast, lots of rubble. It can't be done. But what you can do afterwards is have a debrief where you can roughly come up with how many you think were there and how many you might have definitely seen or might have seen. And that's why the IDF is operating at a ballpark figure rather than a specific figure, because of that chaos and the difficulty in working out exactly what happened during a firefight when everyone's adrenaline is flowing. People are terrified because it is scary, and anyone who says it's not is lying to you or a psychopath. But this is the highest end of human emotion, and you cannot expect soldiers to be meticulously counting everything as they go through this unbelievable experience that most people in the world never will, thankfully, have to experience. So that's why it's so difficult for the IDF. But they have been broadly accurate before. Maybe a bit of an overcount, but nothing that suggests they've got it wrong. And so when we look at, I think it's 56,000 now. If we look at the 56,000. We can say with relative certainty there will be some old age deaths in there. We look at the percentages of those killed in the 15 to 45 age group, which is roughly the fighting age of a man in Gaza, using, with Hamas's well-documented use of child soldiers. That's 72% male in that age group, which certainly I think suggests that there is targeting going on here, especially if you think before the war, Gaza's population was only 25% male, adult male. It was 75% under 18s and women, 25% adult men. And yet 72% of the deaths are adult men. So there's definitely some targeting going on here. I think when the dust settles, the Hamas number will go up a bit and the IDF number will prove to be just about right.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Winston Marshall Show. You can click here to watch the full episode, and for more clips like this one, don't forget to subscribe. And as always, be well.